Thank you so much once again for joining us on the program. Several foreign delegations are in Iran to attend the funeral ceremony of late President Ebrahim Raisi and other officials who died in a helicopter crash on Sunday. Thousands of Iranians also gathered in Tehran's Freedom Square to mourn the deceased. The supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, led prayers at Tehran's university, where caskets carrying the dead were draped in Iranian flags. Also in attendance were top leaders of Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard, the leader of Hamas group, Ismail Haniyeh, prime ministers of Iraq, Pakistan, among others. While Iranians observe a 5-day mourning period, the country has halted all cultural and artistic activities across the country for 7 days, including concerts and wedding ceremonies. Mr. Raisi's body will be taken to his hometown of Mashhad, where he will be buried, while the body of Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian will be buried in southern Tehran. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin says his country is ready to do everything it can to provide Iran with assistance in determining the true cause of President Raisi's helicopter crash. He made this known at a meeting with State Duma chairperson. Mr. Putin said Mr. President Raisi's death is truly a great loss for the Iranian people, adding that Moscow will make every effort to ensure that Russian-Iranian relations continue to develop in the same spirit. The Russian president also said that Mr. Raisi was a very reliable partner, guided by national interests, indicating he was a man of his word. Let's take our first discussion of the program. Joining us now is Professor David Awarawa, the professor and head of Department of History and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, Professor.
Thank you for inviting me.
First, let's get your initial reaction when you heard the Iranian president, Ebrahim Raisi, was confirmed dead in a helicopter crash on Sunday.
When anyone dies like that in a very horrific manner, himself and a couple of others, one will be saddened by that. I was saddened by the news of the death. Initially, it was thought that they will survive, especially when there was some information from the side that. When it was confirmed that they had died, it was painful. I didn't feel, I felt bad that, himself, the foreign minister, and several others died in that horrific helicopter crash.
Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin doesn't seem to believe that the weather played a key role in the crash. He's saying, that the country will do everything it can to determine the true cause of the incident. Many are curious. Do you suspect any foul play here?
Well, when one considers how the whole thing unfolded, it is most likely an accident. When the weather is bad, as it was reported, it's not a very good weather condition for helicopters to fly safely. You recall the case of our own Wigwe in the US in February. The same description, weather that's wintry, that is foggy, that is misty. That kind of weather is not the best weather for helicopters to fly safely. So it's most likely just an accident, but you can't rule out anything. The possibility of foul play is also there, especially when you consider the fact that only a few weeks ago, you had that attack, on Israel by Iran, and the counter-attack by Israel, and of course the back and forth between Iran and Israel, Iran and the US, Iran and the West. So you can't rule out anything, even though it seems as if the crash was just an accident.
And, it's mixed feelings for Iranians when they learned of the death of the president, with some rejoicing. Mr. Raisi is viewed as an ultra-conservative figure responsible for enforcing repressive laws and crackdown on protests and dissidents. What kind of leader would you say Mr. Raisi was?
He's very easy to describe, very, very easy to describe, Raisi. Ultra conservative, that is just the simple way to describe him. Some also, perceive him as someone who was brutal. In fact, some people call him the Bush of Iran, some call him the Bush of Tehran. He was ultra conservative. And that was manifested in everything that took place domestically in Iran during his period as president. Strict Islamic law being enforced. You will recall 2022 that lady that died because of hijab and the protest, and then the way the government responded to the protest with many people dying. That is a kind of image people have of Raisi. Ultra conservative, who could be, brutal in responding to, protests against the government. So many don't see him as a liberal, and he wasn't one. And that is the memory of him that many have, which is why when he died, a section of, even though muted, not displayed, a section of the Iranian population actually began to rejoice that the tyrant had died. So that is the image: ultra conservative, determined to enforce strict Islamic law at a time that the world is changing, that the world is becoming more liberal. So that conflict also defined, who he was as Iranian president.
And do you think, his death would have any impact on the political sphere in Iran?
It will not have any impact in the immediate, but it will likely have an impact in the long run. Let me explain. He was tipped to replace Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Khamenei is 85 years of age, so people are expecting that in the next decade or so, he won't be on the political scene. And so if he succeeds Khamenei, the ultra-conservative approach to governance in Iran will continue. But now that he will not be there to replace Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the thoughts are that whoever will replace Khamenei will not be as, it will be difficult to find a hardliner, in the character of Ali Khamenei and Raisi that will replace, Khamenei. So people think that in the immediate, Khamenei, the Guardian Council, will make it impossible for any major political reform to take place. But if Khamenei leaves the scene, and with Raisi not being there to replace him, in the long run, things will begin to liberalize in Iran. That's a thought of many. And that seems a plausible impact or consequence of this tragic death.
And the country is, expected to hold elections now in June the 28th, to choose a new president. Do you envisage a large turnout? Professor, I'm asking, the country is expected to hold its elections in June the 28th, to be able to choose a new president. What do you think? Do you think there'll be a large turnout of people to pick a new president?
Well, it depends on what the Guardian Council does. In the previous election, the Guardian Council has always screened out those that are perceived not to belong to that caucus, that ultra-conservative caucus. So if the Guardian Council screens out people that the Iranians think will make some shifts, there will be low turnout. But if they open up the space, become more inclusive, and we have one or two candidates that will not belong to that ultra-conservative circle, the turnout will likely be large, because they thought to me that it won't make any difference. I mean, there won't be much change if they screen out, as they have done in previous elections, screen out people who they think may shift Iran a bit away from the conservative, position. So it depends on what the Guardian Council does. If it is opened up, the turnout will likely be large. They may want to make a change. But if it is still narrowed down to that same small group of ultra-conservative elements within Iran, then of course, almost certainly, turnout will be very, very low. So it depends on what happens between now and the 28th, of June, when the elections are scheduled to hold.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Professor David Aworo, Professor of History and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos. Thank you. A man that was charged by British police for allegedly spying for Hong Kong's intelligence services has been found dead in a park outside of London. Police are investigating the unexplained death of 37-year-old Matthew Trickett, whose body was found by a member of the public in the park in Maidenhead, Berkshire, west of London on Sunday. Mr. Trickett had appeared alongside two other suspects at Westminster Magistrate Court on May 13th, charged with national security offences. All three were granted bail but they were barred from travelling internationally. The Chinese embassy in the UK and Hong Kong's chief executive John Lee have both condemned and rejected the accusations. Relations between Hong Kong and its former colonial ruler, Britain, have soared in recent years following mass pro-democracy protests in the Chinese city in 2019 and 2020. The charges against the three men allege that between December 20, 2023 and May 2nd, 2024, they agreed to undertake information gathering, surveillance, and acts of deception that were likely to materially assist the Foreign Intelligence Service. In Argentina, mass rallies and encampments have continued to surge across Misiones province in northeastern Argentina as police officers and education workers demand higher pay and better working conditions. Protesters played instruments and even cooked some food, while some education and healthcare employees set up tents and umbrellas in an attempt to block highways, which caused traffic disruption in the area. Of top priority among their demand is the call for salary increases. They're also requesting a 70% pay rise, but provisional authorities had offered only about 15%. The wave of protests, which started out last week, has prompted the government's crisis committee to hold a meeting on the rallies and also to demand a halt to the industrial action. And hundreds of teachers in Madrid, the capital of Spain, marched in the streets to demand better working conditions and to protest against the privatization of public education. The Spanish government came under this kind of critique on its public spending in the education sector in the last 2 years. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, 17% of young Spaniards aged between 18 and 24 are neither working nor studying in school. Well, fuel shortages have hit New Caledonia as anti-French unrest continues in the French Pacific territory. Long queues and food rationing are now the order of the day at several supermarkets in Numia, even as the country faces supply chain constraints following the blockage of several roads across New Caledonia. Also limited is the time one can spend in the supermarket per visit. Clashes erupted last week after the French Parliament in Paris passed reforms to widen the voting franchise and potentially erode the influence of the island's indigenous community. Now, this would mean French residents of the territory would be able to vote for 10 years or more. We are in the US now, where an unconfirmed number of people have died and dozens injured from the force of a tornado in Iowa as powerful storms swept through the Midwest. In Greenfield, the worst hit town, homes and businesses and cars were destroyed. Tornadoes, heavy rain, and power cuts also hit Nebraska, Illinois, and Wisconsin. The town's hospital was among the buildings damaged, forcing 12 injured people to seek shelter elsewhere. A state of emergency has been declared for 15 Iowa counties in light of the severe weather conditions prevailing across the state. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, joins us now for more. Hello, Maria. What's the situation with the storms in Iowa? We know Greenfield endured the deadliest tornado of all.
Yes, you are correct. It is a time where they're beginning to clean up. There were over 10 storms that were actually brought forth, and there were devastating storms, some of the deadliest they'd ever seen. Many people have stated that they thought they were actually going to die as a result of these storms. They were so strong in force and so damaging. And so we're looking at over 100,000 homes that are actually impacted by this. And then additionally, there are individuals that are clearly without their home at this time and needing to find other housing. And this is also causing major concerns with electricity, water, and just basic resources in the community. So the devastation has put quite a damper on the Iowa communities, several of those cities, and they're beginning the cleanup. And we can expect that there will be emergency relief brought forth from the federal government to assist with this.
People going about their daily businesses and activities amidst this power outages and so much destruction.
Yeah, people are not going to be able to continue with their typical activities, to your point, because of the power outages. So people are really focusing now on their safety and security, and most importantly, trying to find ways to begin the cleanup process and making sure that there are no additional storms headed their way, as it's expected that we could see some severe weather in the Midwest throughout the weekend.
And has there been any evacuation plans to, the temporary shelters, being that some homes have been destroyed?
Yes, well, there will be temporary shelters set up for individuals that need housing for homes that have been destroyed, and that will come through the emergency relief programs with the state. So individuals will have access to that. Red Cross will be available to assist individuals with that as well. And then to your point, some will actually leave and potentially go with family members in other parts of the state or other states altogether.
And we know that a state of emergency has been declared. What's the National Weather Authority saying about the tornadoes? Is this expected to continue?
Well, we could see severe storms throughout the weekend, but it's at this time, it feels as if it is settled. But they're stating that due to the atmospheric pressures that have been underway over the last few weeks, that there could be other storms. And the issue is really about the severity of the storm. There could be small storms, or there could be storms that are as deadly as this one has been.
All right, Maria Bird, thank you so much. We'll move now to Vietnam, where the parliament has approved Public Security Minister To Lam as the country's new president after a major anti-corruption campaign forced his predecessor to resign. In line with what the one-party state's usual procedures, the National Assembly voted unanimously on a resolution that approved 66-year-old Lam's election after a secret ballot in which he was the only candidate for the job. Now, the vote followed his nomination by the ruling Communist Party last week. Mr. Lam takes over from Vo Van Thuong, who resigned in March over what the party called violations and shortcomings after just a year on the job. The next month, the National Assembly chairman also resigned over violations and shortcomings. Analysts have said that Mr. Lam, who is deputy head of the Steering Committee on Anti-Corruption, has weaponized its investigations to take down his political rivals. We're in Africa now. At least 18 people have died after a minibus they were traveling in fell into the Nile River in Menufia Governorate, northwest of Cairo in Egypt. Footage shows rescuers sailing on ferries on the site of the incident, a crane working at the harbor, and locals watching the operation from both sides of the river. Local media reports that the minibus fell off the Abu Ghalib crossing, claiming the lives of 18 out of 26 passengers. Preliminary investigations say the bus driver got into a verbal disagreement with a person on the ferry and left the vehicle without putting the brakes on, which caused it to tumble into the Nile. He was reportedly arrested after trying to flee from the site. A technical committee has recovered the vehicle to ascertain the reasons for the accident as river rescuers continue to work looking for bodies of victims. Kenya's President William Ruto is on a visit to the United States this week as efforts to deepen economic and security cooperation between the two countries go on. The two countries also plan to launch a long-stalled police deployment to Haiti. The trip comes as US President Joe Biden's administration seeks to strengthen partnerships with African nations amid growing competition on the continent with its top geopolitical rivals, China and Russia. Mr. Ruto, who will hold talks with Mr. Biden at the White House, is also visiting the US as a United Nations-backed initiative to send a Kenya-led police force to Haiti appears to be solidifying. Last week, the UN Security Council authorized the multinational support mission, which its backers say is needed to help restore security in the Caribbean country of Haiti amid years of widespread gang violence and instability. The plan has, however, been fraught with many legal hurdles. As part of its measures to bridge the gender gap in the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields, the United States government is encouraging girls in secondary schools in Nigeria, as well as other countries, to consider learning about the opportunities in this area and to take steps toward exploring them. The U.S. Consul General Lagos, Will Stevens, listed these points in a chat with some secondary school students during an event to launch the Girl Lead STEM Talent Accelerator program in Benin City, the Edo State capital.
The program that we're talking about today, which I hope many of you will be able to participate in, is about STEM for girls. And this is an area where we continue to need to work around the world. There is a gender divide between boys and girls in STEM fields in every country in the world. And at the same time, there's a huge interest in the private sector, in government, to try to, what we call, bridge that divide, make it easier for women and girls to get into those fields. So it starts with you working hard in chemistry. Who was the one that loved chemistry? I'm terrified of chemistry, so you probably know it better than I do. I haven't done it since I was your age. Or mathematics, engineering, robotics, computer skills. These are the things that you're learning now that you can take with you to university. And those universities want you. They want smart, talented, driven young women to come in and fill their faculties in those fields. And then companies want you because they want to help bridge that divide. So the job opportunities are there. There are many, many venture capital funds. These are the people who give money to tech startups who are specifically focused on female founders, women who started their own businesses. And there's hundreds of millions of dollars in Africa focused just on supporting female founders. So you may be thinking like, I'm 16, what is this crazy guy talking about? But when you're 23 and you finish your university and you're ready to start a company, there's money there specifically to help you. So I'm hoping just by like getting you energized today that you'll believe me that there are opportunities for you in these fields. That this is, in my mind, one of the biggest area of opportunity for the relationship between the United States and Nigeria, and an opportunity for incredible growth in Nigeria.
A union leader in Mozambique says more than 1,000 people have died in the country because of a lack of care amid a health workers' strike, with most of the deaths reported in the provinces of Inhambane and Sofala. The death figures have not been verified by the government. The health ministry has in the past accused the Association of United Health Professionals of Mozambique of exaggeration. However, union leader Anselmo Mukave says the workers are being forced to strike because they face dire conditions with which the government refuses to confront. The strike by 50,000 union members began 3 weeks ago after negotiations over working conditions collapsed. Doctors are not on strike, but union leaders said many health facilities, are not employing the doctors. Nurses, psychologists, drivers, and cleaners are also among those striking for overtime allowances and better medical equipment. Let's take a break now on the program. Still ahead. Hundreds of people gather in South Korea for a power nap contest where judges are expected to crown the deepest sleeper. We'll bring you more after the break. Please join us again. Thank you for staying with us. We're now in South Africa, where the country's inflation rate cooled down to 5.3% in March 2024 from a 4-month high of 5.6% in February, and that's according to the National Statistics Agency. However, many people still struggle to make ends meet. Like many growing countries, South Africa still faces the difficulties of distributing its wealth with less than a week before the national elections. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, was in Diepsloot to evaluate past election promises.
It's the country's economic hub, Johannesburg. Driving throughout Diepsloot, we're hearing testimonies of unfulfilled promises. 24-year-old Emmanuel Mpahlele feels forgotten by the government.
I feel forgotten because when it's time for voting, they will come to us and promise things and say a lot of things, but nothing will change.
Amidst the prevailing despondency, there are still individuals who maintain optimism about the future. Meet Priscilla Moyo, who has been staying in Diepsloot for the past 15 years.
Whichever party is going to win, it must change. You know, here in Diepsloot, there's too much crime. There are no jobs. People are not working. I don't want to lie to you. I would love whichever government is going to win to make sure that there are jobs, they create jobs, whether it's a small business, whether it's a little, it's something to do with helping people.
Economists outlined necessary measures for South Africa to effectively address inflation and inequality.
We have to create an environment in which it is easy for businesses to thrive and be globally competitive in South Africa. In other words, we have to remove any growth bottlenecks, and at the same time, we have to be very cognizant of any cost pressure. And here we would, of course, include any direct costs, including for example, from any regulated tariffs, and at the same time, we're also cognizant then of any indirect cost. In other words, coming from, for example, uncertainty, delays, inefficiencies, etc. If we do this and we have a thriving, competitive, efficient business sector, while at the same time being very cognizant of any regulated cost pressures, whether they be direct or indirect, we will address both the growth problem and at the same time have a better lid on inflation.
Well, two things are basically required to get South Africa's inflation lower and to reduce inequality. To get the inflation lower in South Africa, we need to create a more competitive macroeconomic environment. And that means that, for example, this huge electricity price increases must be something of the past. And one way of achieving that is to privatize Eskom, as an example. This is exactly what is currently happening to Eskom. So we need to create a more competitive macroeconomic environment. And then to reduce inequality in South Africa, there's only one thing that can really sustainably reduce inequality, and that's economic growth.
Well, with less than a week before elections, we're getting mixed emotions from voters. Some are calling for a government of national unity where all political parties work together. And this is what many commentators have been predicting, that we're heading to a coalition government. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
Staying with South Africa, farmers are enjoying a boost in foreign demand for their red meat. Industry experts share their views on the growing international demand for South African beef and other meat products, particularly in the Middle East.
This is the NAMPO 2024 Agricultural Exhibition at NAMPO Park in Bothaville of the Free State Province, South Africa. Handlers feed and examine the cows. South African animal farmers are seeing increased demand for red meat and live animals outside the country.
If you look at the first 3 months of this year, we exported, well, more than what we did last year. So year on year, I think within the first 3 months, we did considerably better. Now, obviously, Saudi Arabia opened up for us. Iran opened up. Oman opened up. We're currently working in Singapore and Malaysia specifically to open up these markets again. And some of these markets obviously look at live animal export as well. So we need to look at the entire spectrum of what we can do with red meat within South Africa and also live animals. Now, that is obviously a contentious issue, and we understand it and we deal with it with a specific delicacy, if I can say that, or in such a way that that we understand that it's very, very delicate and it's a difficult subject to talk about.
Specialists welcome the government's push to encourage emerging farmers to maximize production.
Our work is to transfer skills and knowledge from the formal sector to the upcoming sector, and we don't do this only by talking and doing trainings, but we also provide genetics. For example, when we've come onto a farm and we see a client and we see where he's short and the gaps, and if we need to improve production on that head using better genetics, we source those genetics in the form of a bull or either AI or in the form of females, and we bring them onto that farm to increase production.
Experts believe the sector will grow as farmers work hard to increase the output volume.
I think the export story is very important because South Africa exports now more than half of what it produces. It matters less on whose product goes to the export market, but rather whether South Africa is able to push enough volume outside the country so that the prices of the commodities can be at a profitable levels. And I think that is what exactly we are seeing at this point. Of course, one would like to see more black farmers also participating in those export markets. And I think as the sector grows and we bring into place the 2.5 million hectares of land that is sitting in government hands, if it comes into production, farmed productively, title deeds overlaid, blended finance accompanying that, then we will begin to see black farmers participating at a much more robust level in the export markets in years to come.
Exports of red meat by cattle farmers and meat producers in South Africa increased in the first quarter of 2024, when markets of other regions opened up to South African meat and fresh produce, including Saudi Arabia. The Kingdom's Food and Drug Administration lifted a 20-year prohibition on South African meat imports in August 2023.
South Korea says it will ban a viral North Korean propaganda tune that extols Pyongyang's dictator Kim Jong-un as a friendly father and great leader. Seoul's media regulator said the music video, which has become a hit on TikTok since its release in April, is a violation of the country's National Security Act. Seoul's Korea Communications Standard Commission said in a statement that the song idolizes Kim Jong-un and praises and glorifies him. The Security Act blocks access to the North's government website and media and penalizes behaviors and speeches in favor of the regime. And finally, on the program, if you are a sleep lover, then make your way to South Korea, where people are hoping to get rewarded just for napping. Hundreds of locals gathered in the capital for an open-air power nap contest, competing to be crowned by judges for having the deepest and calmest sleep. Participants can be seen sleeping on colorful bean bags laid out on the grass at the Unido Han River Park. They are tasked with sleeping for 90 minutes, while judges deploy various distractions like feather tickling and mosquito sounds to test their prowess. According to media reports, the contest aims to raise awareness of the importance of rest and good sleep. A heart rate monitor ensured the best quality sleeper won the contest, and the winner was awarded a certificate for her outstanding performance. For rest and sleep is really needed for a great health. That's it on The World Today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.